Hi guys, in this episode I'm telling you the 7 things you need to know about waste management in Workers and Resources Soviet Republic. So, first thing is understanding waste generation and types of waste. Okay, so let's get into it. So each building, everywhere there are people, there would be a waste generation. So buildings like this where people are living, they generate waste, but also places where people work. So for instance, a facility like this, a waste management facility, or a prison, or a university where people are working, they would also be generating waste. Now, in general, where there are different types of waste, but it's not that easy to kind of identify them. So if you have a look at, actually for residential buildings, you can't actually see waste generation. So here we can have a look at all the details and we can see a variety of things like power usage and building lifespan and water consumption, but we don't actually see waste generation. If we were to come over here to say the art gallery, we can see that there's a garbage production there of 0.32 kilograms per worker per day, I believe. And there's a garbage production per customer as well. So per customer, per worker, and the same goes for most of our other kind of types of buildings. You will also see that they generate a little bit of waste in here. So you can see that and you can kind of see what it's made up of. Burnable waste, biological waste, etc. Similarly over here, residential building. Do we have a residential building with some stuff in it? Yeah, a little bit over there. Here we can see there's a little bit of metal scrap, a little bit of plastic waste, a little bit of biological waste, a little bit of burnable waste, and some other waste, which it's quite difficult to understand. Now, so that's really the other piece that you have is you also have hazardous waste. So hospitals and various forms of industrial buildings generates hazardous waste. Okay, so that's kind of the first piece. So mixed waste, and it consists of various different types. Is generated by residential buildings and industrial buildings, and then hazardous waste is generated by industrial buildings. The second thing that you need to know is waste collection. So here we see a truck that is busy collecting waste. Now, that is so you can either collect waste directly from buildings, and if you take your technical, it is collected from the technical services facility. So if you look at that, you can see which buildings are being used for collection. Now, this actually highlights 2 different types of collection. Either building by building collection, okay, where we go to individual, where we have these trucks go to individual buildings, or you can do central collection like over here. So you can build these, what do they actually call it? Stand for big garbage containers or stand for small garbage containers. And you link them via a walking distance. So you link them to the various buildings. You build them in close proximity, and you can see they are collecting. So if I pause it there, or if I stop it there, you can see that this waste facility here is collecting waste from that building, this building over here, as well as that building over there and that building over there. So it's collecting waste from a variety of different buildings. So that's kind of the idea with centralized collection. Okay, so that it is also worth noting, and I'll talk a little bit about separation later. It is worth noting that if you're collecting from a building directly, it only has one storage container, and that cannot be used for waste separation. So if you wanted to separate waste out, you needed a stand for garbage containers in some areas. So I would definitely recommend using central garbage collection. It's just more flexible and requires less vehicles than collecting building by building. The third thing to know is the container size. So there's different trucks. Over here we can have, so let's have a look. If we were to buy, let's have a look at garbage, waste trucks per se. So here we can say big garbage container trucks is these, and please make sure you double check that they know. So under features, it says large container platform, and here it says small container loading. It still has various sizes, but but it's in terms of the kind of the vehicle, the container sizes that it uses. And you can kind of see it over here. So this is like the normal garbage truck that most of us would know from running around the streets in our cities and collecting the small containers from buildings and houses and things like that, where these are the more large-scale industrial style larger containers. Now, one thing to note is that the size of these containers is absolutely tiny. So a small container, this is a small container, only takes about 0.12, and let's speed things up a little bit, 0.12 tons of waste. So it's very little in terms of waste before this thing is going to overflow. Whereas the large containers, let's have a look at the large containers. The large containers basically does 6.5 tons per container. So various buildings will generate various sizes of, or will have various sizes of containers. Here we go. Let's have a look. So here comes the small container vehicle. It is coming to collect directly from a building over here. It is currently empty. It is coming to collect where? Ooh, let's try and see that. It's coming to collect it. There we go, collecting it. And you can see it's 0.11 tons of mixed waste. And now, there it goes. So basically, you need so many of these. If you're collecting from every building, these are the only buildings that I'm using direct collection at. So we don't need as many. But if you were collecting at all of these buildings, it would have been a pretty big mess. So I can definitely recommend using the larger containers. So certain buildings will use large containers over small waste containers. And it's typically the industrial one. So let's make a move to over here. Everything generally, well, these don't actually use workers. Would need workers to be able to generate it. See, here we go. So this water treatment facility has a large mixed waste container. So it'll use the large truck. You can actually see it out there. There it is, parked over there. But it's got a central collection over here too. So that's basically what it is. So your more industrial buildings will have large containers, while your more city-based and residential buildings will have the smaller containers. Okay, so that's something to note. So if you are using lots of the smaller ones, it might definitely be worth doing the centralized ones. In industrial areas where they use the bigger containers, that is 6.5 tons. There you should probably be okay. Now, moving on to the fourth thing. So now that you've got your waste collection underway and you kind of understand who's generating what kind of waste, the next thing you need to have a look at is get yourself a technical services building. And from technical services, you can actually go and stock it with waste collection vehicles, waste trucks. And then you need to tell them where to go and dump the various stuff. And we'll talk a little bit later about some of these different types of waste. But in general, you can go and dump your mixed waste and your hazardous waste and the varieties of things in different locations. But for the starting point, you'll probably just have mixed waste. So this over here is where I'm dumping it. A big container area over here. So I'm basically bringing in all of those large containers over here. The small containers is also dumped into these ones over here. And from there, we are basically processing waste into a separation facility. So if we look at the waste menu itself, we can have a look at these are the container areas. Then the next step is waste separation. And we'll talk about getting rid of waste ultimately and why waste separation is such an important player. So general waste separation would take your mixed waste and it would separate out construction waste, metal scrap, aluminum scrap, plastic waste, and it would further generate mixed waste, typically the burnable variety of mixed waste, so bio-waste and other burnable varieties. You can see here that the separation efficiency is 65% construction waste, 87% metal scrap, 85% aluminum scrap, and 60% plastic waste. You do get specialized facilities that's going to get you more metal scrap out of your waste stream. So if you have a lot of construction waste, for instance, you've got a construction or demolition yard, demolition facilities, or you've got construction material areas where you're building your own or creating your own construction materials, they would typically generate a fair bit of construction waste. But also, say your more industrial types would have metal scraps and even aluminum scraps. And so from there, you can see this one is a 98% metal scrap separation efficiency. So you literally take out 98% of metal scrap out of your mixed waste. And similarly with this, if you use aluminum separation, it's 97% aluminum. So basically, you could use these two to get that out of the stream. And what would remain is basically your burnable waste. So if you use these, if you potentially use those two instead of a general separation, you would take out your metal scrap plus your aluminum scrap, and you would have to run it once through the one and then once through the other one. So it becomes a bit of a convoluted process. And then potentially you can run it through a general separation where you won't then get any of those metal or aluminum scrap, but you can still take out the construction waste and plastic waste. But it is a convoluted story. So let's have a look at what I've done over here. This is just a general separation facility, and we don't have any. Let's play the game. We don't have any waste here at the moment. You can see that. So what it does is it takes the mixed waste in here. It then separates the waste into various areas, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then it also has mixed waste left over. So what you can see is that is burnable waste only. What we'll do is we'll try and spot, okay, here comes something in here. So what we'll do is at the moment, actually, let's have a look at that right now. So here you can see there's metal scrap in there, there's plastic waste in there, and there's biological waste in there, and there's burnable waste in there, and other waste, okay? So once it's separated, those other components will be taken out, and what will be left at this end is only basically burnable waste and other waste, but generally that's burnable waste. So the other bits and pieces would be processed through here, and it would go to the plastic. So from here, you would generate metal scrap, aluminum scrap, plastic waste, construction waste. So plastic waste would make its way over here, and then it will be recycled from a plastic recycling plant into new plastic. Similarly, your construction waste would make its way over here to the gravel recycling plant, where construction waste is processed into gravel. You have the steel recycling plant, where metal scrap is then kind of converted into steel. As you can see, we've got a little bit of steel over there. And you've got the aluminum recycling plant, where aluminum scrap is turned into aluminum. So that's basically, in a nutshell, how the separation and the recycling of these facilities work. Number 5 is waste disposal. Okay, so once you've done that, right, now you've got a container here with some mixed waste. It's generally burnable. So now you move it along to incineration. Here you can see, actually, that's exactly what's happening at the moment. We are dropping off our burnable waste over here. A bus has just arrived. This is an incinerator. There's people there working away, so you can see we're burning that out. And then if it's only burnable waste, what you would see is it then needs to go into a dump area. And there you can see it's ash. It's just been burned and it's ash. And if it's just ash, it will dissipate over time. So the moment this guy stops working, let's just see, that's done. There's nothing left there. So it's not generating anymore. And now you can see that very slowly this is dissipating. Can you see that's dropping? 44, 40, probably drop down to like 36, 34. So you clearly get rid of your ash pretty quickly. It kind of just dissipates over time. But if you did not separate out stuff, right? If you didn't use a facility where you separated your various types of recyclable materials, whether that be metal scrap, aluminum scrap, construction waste, or plastic waste, you would actively end up with this thing not emptying and it just filling up, and you would have still mixed waste in there. Some ash will dissipate, but you will end up with a lot of different types of mixed waste, so you would then have to separate it again. So it is important that you separate your waste as a starting point before you go and incinerate it. Now, it's also important to know that there's a variety of different ways you can effectively dispose of your waste. You can, as a starting point, build an incinerator and just burn it. Okay, that's the one. You also have an incineration power plant where you can actually burn your waste and turn it into electricity. And I'm not playing with the seasons on. You can also have an incinerator plant that burns waste to generate heat. So that's another one that is quite useful for you to understand. But I would add a little bit of caution in here. As you can see, this thing is not running at all, right? It runs for little bits of time. So if you were generating your heat or your power from an incineration plant like this, it will be start and stop all the time. So I do say definitely use that with caution. I've played with it a little bit. You can't sustain power, or I haven't been able to, on fairly small cities, been able to sustain continuous power production from an incinerator. Maybe with a larger public that's generating a lot of waste, you can do that. But I would say start with just a normal incinerator where you're just burning it and you're not using that, at least at your smaller republics, until you have sufficient waste generation so this thing runs all the time, in which case that can then go on from there. Now that you understand kind of the basics around waste disposal, I want to quickly pop into this here. So you can see here what I've done is these garbage stands, collection stands. It shows you mixed waste, and here you can see biological waste. If you look at this one, it has room for mixed waste, and it has room for biological waste, and it has room for hazardous waste. So how do you get to that point? If you are playing with research, it is worth noting that there is a bit of a research process around waste and waste management. We move it on over here. So here we can see processing and disposal of waste, waste separation, and waste separation edification. So you need to get to waste separation edification. You need that researched in order to allocate the various types of waste in these central collection facilities. Again, worth noting that if you're collecting directly from a building, you cannot separate the waste. You do need these centralized collection points to separate the waste out. Okay, so how do you know what kind of waste you can separate? Well, in general, my experience, I do not know this for a fact because I haven't been able to find any information within the game. I haven't gone into like game program files or anything, but I haven't been able to identify any information here that says what kind of waste it generates. So my experience has been residential buildings generates mixed waste, which kind of is built up of a little bit of everything, mainly plastics, maybe a little bit of metal scrap, but other than that, probably burnable waste, only wood and paper and things like that. But they also generate a lot of biological waste. I don't quite know where the biological waste comes from because we are playing with water and sewer facilities, so presumably a lot of the biological waste is something different than that. But anyway, biological waste is generated by buildings as well. Anywhere where there is people living or workers working, it will generate biological waste. Then hospitals and other industrial facilities generates a little bit of hazardous waste as well. So it's good that your central areas have hazardous waste ready to go, or places where you can collect hazardous waste. So that's basically your research. And once you've got that edification, you can then set it up so that it collects like this. And then you can also then, of course, assign your different types of waste if you're edifying it in such a way. So I'm only edifying biological waste, hazardous waste, and mixed waste. And so that is what I've set up for my technical services, right? So if we have a look at this one here, we're splitting it into those. I can allocate one for metal scrap and plastic waste and so on, but I found that it generates it so slowly that you're just better off separating it yourself. But maybe if you've got enough of these facilities around, maybe you can just allow the people who live here to actually do the separation for you as part of the edification. The final thing, number 7, that you need to know is special types of waste. So we've now talked about edification, where we've seen biological waste and hazardous waste. Now those two you can use for separate things. The other waste streams that you can get out of separation, you can recycle and you can reuse it. So your metal scrap turns into steel, aluminum scrap into aluminum, construction waste into gravel, plastic waste into plastic. But these special waste types, you have very special facilities for them. So on the one hand, you've got a composting plant that uses biological waste and turns that, using a little bit of chemicals, turns that into fertilizer. Fertilizer can then be applied. So we're dumping the biological waste in here. Once it's being processed, we get fertilizer. Fertilizer can then be applied to fields. So so you don't necessarily then have to buy synthetic fertilizers or make synthetic fertilizers for your farming and fields. You can use your biological waste, turn it into fertilizer, and fertilize your fields in that way. You need a lot of it to do that, though. So again, what I would suggest is get as much of your biological waste into composting facilities so you can use them as fertilizers. The other one is hazardous waste. Now, hazardous waste is an interesting one. You've got the waste treatment plant here that basically has the efficiency that reduces that to 0% hazardous. That's basically what it does. It uses chemicals and then it generates mixed waste. Okay? So it takes hazardous waste, makes mixed waste of it, and the mixed waste is then biological waste and burnable waste. Interesting. It's biological waste. So what we can potentially do is we can say, grab one biological waste container there. So that should then separate it itself, and the rest can just be mixed waste or something to that effect. So as it moves through, it should be able to separate that out. I haven't actually tested that, but that should be a possibility over here. Something to be burnt over here. And then from there, you can again burn all the burnable stuff and it becomes ash and you get rid of that. You don't necessarily need a waste treatment plant. You can burn hazardous waste directly within your incinerator, but it does, I believe, maintain 50% hazardous materials. Okay. And that means I believe it would be worse in terms of pollution. I have not seen any real impacts of doing so, but it is worth noting that you're not getting all of the hazardous stuff away if you don't take it through a treatment plant. But in the early game, I can definitely recommend skipping the waste treatment plant and just going directly into incineration until you've got enough of an economy going so that something like this isn't too expensive and you can afford the chemicals that is used for that. Fertilizer is very useful. Hazardous treatment facilities like this, less useful straight away. But obviously, from an environmental perspective, reducing your pollution and things like that, I believe that is where these things come into play. But I stand under correction. Let me know in the comments if you know the difference between burning hazardous waste directly or just using or using treated waste into burnable waste. So guys, in a nutshell, those are the 7 things you need to know about waste production and waste management and how to just kind of deal with waste in workers and resources. If you have enjoyed this video and would like to see more stuff such as this, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and leave your comments down below. Bye-bye.